Welcome to Daily Stoic Practice, your compass to navigate the complexities of modern life with ancient wisdom. Have you ever felt like a light bulb in someone's life? You're always there to shine when they need you, but the moment they don't, you're turned off and forgotten? Think about it. How much time, how much care have you devoted to them? You were always ready to listen, always there when they needed you, sacrificing your own priorities just to make them happy. And yet, what did you get in return? A simple rejection, a cold silence, or worse, a sense that you were never truly important to them. Have you ever laid in bed late at night, staring at the ceiling, asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Why, even after giving everything, wasn't it enough to make them stay? And then you tell yourself, I have to say something, do something to make them see my worth. But let me tell you this, it's not the words you say, not the desperate efforts to hold on, not the tears that will make them see your value. It's your silence. Yes, you heard that right. Silence, something you might think of as an empty void, is actually one of the most powerful tools you possess. Today, I want to share with you a completely different approach. One that doesn't just help you regain control of your life, but also forces them to face the consequences of rejecting you. It's the power of silence, guided by the principles of Stoicism, a philosophy that has endured for thousands of years and remains as relevant today as ever. But first, let me ask you this. Are you ready to stop searching for answers from others and instead find them within yourself? If that feels difficult, don't worry. You're not alone. I've been where you are. But trust me, the journey we're about to begin can change the way you see everything. Let's dive into the story of silence and why sometimes not saying anything is the most powerful response you can make. Part 1. Understanding Stoicism and Silence. Do you know what Stoicism is? If you don't worry. I'll explain it in the simplest way possible. Stoicism isn't some abstract philosophy meant only for scholars or philosophers. It's a practical way of living, one you can apply to your everyday life. Stoicism dates back to around the 3rd century BCE. It was founded by a Greek philosopher named Zeno in Athens. The philosophy quickly gained popularity and was embraced by great leaders like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, who used it to navigate life's pressures and challenges. So what's the core of Stoicism? It's about focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you can't. Sounds simple, right? But think about how often we exhaust ourselves trying to change things that are entirely beyond our control. Here's an example. You can't control how others treat you, but you can control how you respond. You can't change what's happened in the past, but you can choose how to move forward. And you can't force someone to see your value, but you can allow them to recognize it on their own through your actions. This is where silence becomes a powerful tool. In a world full of noise, where everyone is rushing to argue, to speak louder, to be heard, silence is a rare and deliberate choice. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen more and speak less." This isn't just a simple reminder, it's a philosophy of life. Silence, in the context of Stoicism, is not passive avoidance. It's a conscious act, a way of exercising control over yourself and the situations around you. Now imagine this, you've just been rejected. It could be in love, at work, or in a cherished relationship. What's your first reaction? Be honest. Most of us feel anger, hurt, and an urge to say everything we're thinking. We want to explain, to convince, even to criticize the other person for not seeing our worth. But according to Stoicism, this is the moment to embrace silence. Why? Because in silence, you reclaim control. When you remain silent, you preserve your dignity and create space, a space that forces the other person to confront their own thoughts. Let me share a story. One of Epictetus's students once asked, How do I deal with people who hurt me without losing control? Epictetus replied, don't try to fix them. Fix yourself. And silence is how you do that. You don't need to argue to prove you're right. You don't need to beg for recognition. You just need to stay silent and let your actions speak for themselves. Silence is a way of reminding yourself, I don't need to win every argument. I just need to keep my peace. So why is silence so important? First, it helps you control your emotions. When you remain silent, you give yourself time to think, to avoid being swept away by impulsive emotional reactions. Instead of saying things you might regret later, you hold back. You wait. You listen to yourself. Second, silence creates space for others to reflect. When you're silent, the other person has to ask themselves, why aren't they reacting? Did I do something wrong? Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to confront their own actions. And finally, silence protects your energy. Let's be honest, arguing, explaining, or trying to convince someone can be exhausting. But when you choose silence, you no longer waste your precious energy on things you can't change. Instead, you can use that energy to focus on yourself, to grow, and to become the best version of who you are. So you see, silence isn't weakness. It's not passivity. It's a powerful expression of inner strength. In Stoicism, silence is how you affirm your worth without saying a word. And if you're wondering how to bring silence into your life, don't worry. In the next part, I'll guide you through practical strategies to make silence your most powerful tool. Part 2. Analyzing post-rejection psychology. Rejection is never an easy experience. It's like a direct blow to your self-esteem. You've invested so much time, effort, maybe even your deepest feelings, only to be met with a cold no. Or worse, complete silence. How did that make you feel? Let's be honest. Our first reaction is almost always pain. It stings, not just because we didn't get what we wanted, but because it feels like our worth has been devalued. And right on the heels of that pain comes anger. Why can't they see my value? Why don't they recognize all that I've done? And then comes the overwhelming urge to act. You want to explain yourself. You want to plead your case. You might even want to lash out just so they feel a fraction of the hurt you're carrying. But here's the truth. None of those actions will make you feel better in the long run. If anything, they drain you even more. This is where Stoicism steps in as a guiding philosophy to help you face those emotions with clarity and purpose. Stoicism teaches us that emotions are natural. It's okay to feel hurt, angry, or frustrated after rejection. But the key is not to let those emotions dictate your actions. As Epictetus wisely said, it's not what happens to you that hurts, but how you interpret it. You can't control whether someone rejects you. That's entirely up to them. What you can control is how you respond. And that's where your power lies. Take a moment to ask yourself, what's within my control in this situation? You can't change their decision. You can't force them to see your worth, but you can choose to remain silent and maintain your dignity. Stoicism doesn't tell you to ignore your pain. Instead, it encourages you to confront it, to accept it, but not to let it define your actions. Imagine you're standing in front of a fire. You can feel the heat. It's intense, but you don't jump into the flames. Instead, you learn to stand at a safe distance, observing without being consumed. That's the approach Stoicism offers for handling rejection. By choosing not to react impulsively, you take back control. Let me share a story. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic philosophers and Roman emperors, faced betrayal from people he trusted. As emperor, he had the power to punish them harshly, to exact revenge. But instead, he chose restraint. In his journal Meditations, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." After rejection, you hold that same power. You don't need to send that text, start that argument, or beg for another chance. Instead, you remind yourself, my silence speaks volumes. It shows I'm strong enough not to be ruled by my emotions. And here's the beauty of controlling your emotions. The pain doesn't last forever. Think of it like a wave. If you resist it, you'll be swept away, exhausted, and left adrift. But if you let it pass, the waters will calm and you'll find peace. Mastering your emotions doesn't just make you feel better. It earns you respect. Your silence forces the other person to wonder, why aren't they reacting? Did I make a mistake? More importantly, it allows you to focus on what truly matters, yourself. Instead of pouring energy into trying to change their mind, redirect it toward growth. Use that time to build your confidence, strengthen your skills, and cultivate a life that doesn't rely on their validation. To practice this, start by acknowledging your feelings. Don't suppress them, but don't let them take over. Accept that some things are out of your hands, and that's okay. Your worth isn't determined by their opinion, it's defined by how you see yourself. In the face of rejection, remember this: your feelings are natural, but your response is your choice. Stoicism doesn't ask you to ignore the pain, it teaches you how to master it. Stay silent, not as a way of seeking revenge, but as a way of protecting your peace. Part 3. The power of silence. Silence at first glance might seem like a passive response, but in reality, it holds a strength few can recognize. After rejection, many of us feel the need to act, to explain, to plead, to demand attention. But in Stoicism, silence is the strongest response you can give. Let's start with the effect silence has on the person who rejected you. When you choose silence, you provide no signals for them to rely on. They begin to wonder. They were used to your presence, the texts, the calls, the effort you made to stay connected. But now silence creates a void they can't ignore. Your silence compels them to think, why aren't they reacting? What are they thinking? Have they moved on? This self-reflection can be powerful. At first, they might feel relief from not hearing from you. But over time, your absence becomes a noticeable gap, like a familiar song that suddenly stops playing. People often realize the value of something only when it's no longer there. Your silence acts as a mirror, forcing them to confront their own actions and decisions. But here's the truth. The real power of silence isn't in how it affects them. It's in how it transforms you. Rejection often leaves us questioning our worth. What did I do wrong? Am I not good enough? These questions are natural, but if left unchecked, they can spiral into self-doubt and insecurity. Silence, however, is a shield that protects you from this downward spiral. When you choose silence, you're telling yourself, I am strong enough to not chase validation from others. I will focus on what I can control. Instead of spending energy thinking about the person who rejected you, invest that energy in yourself. Learn a new skill. Focus on your career. Take care of your mental and physical well-being. Let me share a story to illustrate this. There was a young man named Brown who poured his heart into a relationship, only to be rejected. At first, he wanted to explain himself, to plead, to fight for what he thought he deserved. But he chose silence instead. Over the following months, Brown channeled his energy into self-improvement. He took leadership courses, started working out, and discovered new passions he had neglected. Months later, when his ex reached out to him with a simple message, I miss talking to you, Brown realized something important. He no longer needed her acknowledgement to feel whole. He had already found his worth within himself. This is the beauty of silence. It doesn't just protect your dignity, it allows you to grow into someone even stronger, someone who doesn't rely on the validation of others. Part 4. Strategies for practicing silence in Stoicism. When people think of silence, they often imagine it as doing nothing, being passive, withdrawing, or giving up. But in Stoicism, silence is not about avoiding reality. It's an intentional, powerful act. It requires patience, self-discipline, and above all, the ability to focus on what you can control instead of being overwhelmed by emotions. So how do you practice silence effectively? It's not something you master overnight, but with consistent effort and some practical strategies, you can develop this skill over time. First strategy: meditation, listening to your inner silence. Meditation is one of the most effective ways to practice silence. It doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming. You don't need to sit in silence for hours or follow strict rituals. Just set aside 5 to 10 minutes a day. Find a quiet spot, sit down, and focus on your breath. As you breathe in and out, notice the thoughts that pop into your mind. Don't try to push them away or hold on to them. Simply acknowledge their presence and let them pass, like water flowing in a stream. Over time, you'll realize how often your mind is cluttered with chaotic thoughts. Meditation creates space, a necessary pause that allows you to find calm. When you meditate regularly, you'll notice a subtle but important shift. You stop reacting impulsively to things happening around you. For example, if you're rejected, instead of immediately texting to explain or react, you'll feel more at ease staying silent and letting things unfold naturally. Second strategy: self-reflection, discovering yourself through stillness. Another effective way to practice silence is by making time for self-reflection. Turn it into a daily habit, like brushing your teeth or drinking your morning coffee. Each evening, sit down alone, maybe with a journal, and think back on your day. Ask yourself, how did I respond to challenges today? Did I let my emotions take control? If I could go back, what would I do differently? Writing down your thoughts doesn't just help organize them. It allows you to track your progress over time. You'll start to notice patterns in your reactions, the strengths you can build on, and the weaknesses you can work to improve. Remember, silence isn't just about how you interact with others. It's also about how you face yourself. In stillness, you'll hear things that daily busyness often drowns out. Third strategy: applying silence in real-life situations. Let's talk about what silence looks like in real-world situations, especially when dealing with rejection. Picture this: you've just been rejected, whether in love, a job opportunity, or a personal relationship. Your first instinct might be to react right away. Maybe you feel the urge to explain, defend yourself, or act out of frustration. That's completely natural, but it's not the best approach. Instead, pause, take a deep breath, hold it for a few seconds, then exhale slowly. Repeat this a few times. This simple act helps interrupt the emotional cycle and brings you back to a calmer state. Now ask yourself, what's within my control? You can't change someone else's decision, but you can choose how you respond. Silence isn't about conceding defeat. It's about protecting your dignity and maintaining self-control. For example, if you're tempted to text the person who rejected you, put your phone down and wait at least 24 hours. This waiting period creates space for you to think clearly and realize that sometimes doing nothing is the most powerful action you can take. Fourth strategy: practicing patience, letting time work for you. Silence doesn't deliver instant results. Sometimes you won't see any changes in the first day, week, or even month. But remember, silence is a process, and its impact takes time to unfold. Be patient. Every day you practice silence, you're strengthening your inner resilience. You're training yourself to control your emotions, focus on yourself, and let go of things that don't belong to you. During this time, you may notice the people around you reacting differently. Your silence forces them to reflect on their own actions and decisions. This is when you start to see the true power of silence. It compels others to confront themselves. Fifth strategy: using silence as a tool for personal growth. Instead of sitting around waiting for others to respond, use this period of silence to invest in yourself. Learn a new skill, commit to a fitness routine, or read books that inspire growth. Every small step you take to improve yourself is a statement that your worth doesn't depend on how others see you, but on who you are. When used correctly, silence helps you overcome the pain of rejection and becomes the foundation for building a better version of yourself. And when you finally cross paths with the person who rejected you, not to seek validation, but simply to show how much you've grown, you'll understand that silence wasn't just a reaction, it was a strength. Remember, silence isn't just about not speaking. It's about preserving your inner peace and using it to guide your life. When you practice silence, you're not giving up. You're taking control, and in that control lies your greatest strength. Part 5, a success story about the power of silence. Let me share a real story with you about how silence can completely transform your life. There was a young man named Brown who lived in the city. He was hardworking, dedicated, and gave his all to every relationship in his life. For a long time, he poured his heart into a romantic relationship with a woman he deeply loved. Brown was always there for her, helping, listening, supporting her in any way she needed. But like many of us who've been in a similar position, his efforts weren't appreciated. One day she told him, "You're a good guy, but I don't think we're right for each other." It was a gentle rejection, but to Brown, it felt like a knife to his self-esteem. At first, his natural reaction was to explain, to plead with her to reconsider. He wanted to tell her how much effort he had put into their relationship, how deeply he loved her. But instead of giving in to those feelings, Brown remembered something he had read about Stoicism. There was a phrase that stuck with him: silence is the strongest response. He decided to put that philosophy into practice. Brown chose silence. He didn't text her, didn't call, didn't try to explain or win her back. He let his silence speak for him. At first, it was incredibly difficult. It felt like he was losing the most important thing in his life. But instead of letting his emotions take over, Brown shifted his focus inward. He started to reflect on himself, on what had happened, and realized that his value didn't depend on how others viewed him. In the months that followed, Brown invested his energy into self-improvement. He signed up for a leadership course he had been putting off. He joined a gym, not just to get physically fit, but to rebuild his confidence. He also started journaling, capturing his thoughts, feelings, and most importantly, documenting the steps of his personal growth. 6 months later, out of the blue, the woman reached out to him. Her message wasn't long, just a simple question. "How have you been? I miss the talks we used to have." But by then, Brown wasn't the same person he had been 6 months earlier. He no longer sought validation from her or anyone else. He replied politely, not with the hope of rekindling their relationship, but simply because he had moved on. He understood something crucial. It didn't matter that she had finally realized his value. What mattered was that he had discovered it for himself long before. What can we learn from Brown's story? First, silence protected his dignity. Instead of begging for her attention or arguing his case, Brown chose to respect himself enough to step back and stay silent. Second, silence wasn't the end. It was the beginning. In the quiet, Brown found the space to rebuild himself. He set new goals, found new motivations, and became stronger. Not because someone else validated him, but because he validated himself. Finally, his silence made her reflect. When Brown stopped seeking her attention, she started to notice the void he left behind. She began to realize the value of what she had taken for granted. But the most beautiful part of this story? Brown didn't need her to come back for him to feel complete. he had already found peace and freedom within himself. And that's exactly what Stoicism teaches us. True strength doesn't come from changing others. It comes from changing ourselves. Brown's story is a powerful reminder that silence isn't a weakness. It's a strategy. It's a way of saying, I know my worth, and I don't need to explain it to anyone. So if you find yourself in a similar situation, remember this: your silence is not a sign of defeat. It's your way of reclaiming your power, rebuilding yourself, and letting others realize on their own what they may have overlooked. Part 6. Warnings and Considerations. Silence, as powerful as it is, must be understood and used correctly. If not, it can be misunderstood as coldness, indifference, or even avoidance. This not only risks damaging relationships, but can also rob you of the chance to handle situations effectively. First, let's be clear. Silence is not a sign of weakness or giving up. In Stoicism, silence is an intentional act. It's a way to maintain your composure when emotions are running high, a way to show that you refuse to let external circumstances dictate your actions. But like any tool, silence is only effective when used at the right time and in the right way. So, when should you stay silent? Silence is an excellent choice in situations where emotions are overwhelming your logic. Think about the times you felt angry, disappointed, or hurt. Those moments when, if you spoke, your words would be driven by negative emotions. In those moments, silence gives you the space to think, to regain your balance before responding. For example, when faced with rejection, many people's first instinct is to react immediately, to send a text, explain themselves, or even lash out. But ask yourself, do those quick reactions ever really lead to positive outcomes? Or do they just leave you feeling exhausted and regretful? In moments like these, silence is your best option. It helps protect your dignity and prevents your emotions from taking control. Silence is also necessary when your words won't change the situation. If someone has already made a decision, trying to persuade or explain further often just adds tension. In these cases, silence allows you to accept reality, let go of what's beyond your control, and hold on to your inner peace. And when should you speak up? While silence is powerful, it's not the answer to every situation. There are times when communication is necessary to resolve a problem or preserve a relationship. For example, if you believe that an honest conversation can improve the situation, staying silent for too long might be misinterpreted as indifference. In these cases, clear, calm, and sincere communication is the way to share your thoughts without letting emotions take over. Before deciding to speak up, ask yourself, will breaking my silence make this situation better? If the answer is yes, then consider your words carefully. The way you communicate is crucial. Choose honesty, stick to the point, and avoid blame or criticism. Effective communication means expressing your feelings in a way that respects both yourself and the other person. Some important reminders about silence. First, don't use silence as a weapon. Silence isn't meant to make someone feel guilty or to punish them. If you use it to manipulate or hurt someone, it will backfire and potentially harm the relationship. Instead, use silence as a way to stay calm, giving both you and the other person space to think more clearly. Second, silence doesn't always lead to recognition. Remember, not everyone will see your value through your silence. Some people simply won't change, no matter what you do. In these situations, silence is still a good strategy. Not to change them, but to protect yourself. Third, listen during silence. Silence isn't just about not speaking, it's about listening. Listening to others, yes, but also listening to yourself. In the quiet moments, you often discover the clearest and most profound answers. Finally, know when to break the silence. There are times when prolonged silence can lead to distance in a relationship. In these cases, consider speaking up, but only when you've regained control of your emotions and are ready to communicate calmly. Silence is a powerful tool, but like any tool, it's only effective when used properly. It's not avoidance or surrender. It's a display of strength and self-control. Knowing when to stay silent and when to speak will help you maintain your dignity, protect your peace, and build stronger, healthier relationships. When all is said and done, there's one truth you must hold on to. Silence is never a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is a profound strength. The strength to master your emotions, to preserve your dignity, and to put yourself first. Rejection can sting, leaving you raw and vulnerable. The impulse to react, to explain, to convince, or to prove someone wrong might feel overwhelming. But pause for a moment. Ask yourself, will any of this truly make you stronger? Or will it only leave you drained, further disconnected from your true self? Silence is not giving up, nor is it a way to avoid the world. Silence is a conscious choice. It requires patience, self-control, and, most importantly, a deep understanding that your worth is not determined by how others see you. Choosing silence sends an unspoken but powerful message. I will not let my emotions dictate my actions. I don't need to prove my worth to anyone. I know who I am, and I am strong enough to stand firm. And this silence does so much more than you realize. First, it helps you stay calm. By resisting the urge to react immediately, you gain time to think, to reassess the situation, and to maintain your dignity. Second, silence creates space for growth. Instead of wasting your energy chasing validation from others, you can focus on rebuilding yourself, learning something new, or simply rediscovering balance in your life. And perhaps most powerfully, your silence forces others to confront their actions, giving them the opportunity to reflect and recognize the value they might have overlooked. Starting now, if you've been hurt, try choosing silence. But don't let that silence become an empty void. Use it to ask yourself the important questions. What truly matters to me? How can I become better because of this experience? Then take action. Invest this time in learning something new, caring for your health, or simply sitting in stillness and listening to the emotions within you that you may have ignored. Be patient with yourself. Change doesn't happen overnight, but each small step you take daily will gradually lead you to a stronger, more confident version of yourself, one who no longer depends on the emotions or validation of others. If you've ever practiced silence in your life, share your story. Maybe you think it's a small moment, but those moments can inspire someone who desperately needs to hear them. And if you're still figuring out how to embrace silence, start today. Start by listening to yourself, and from there, act with calmness and self-assurance. Remember, silence is not the end. It's the beginning of growth, freedom, and inner strength that you may not have even realized was there. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this resonates with you, please like and subscribe to Daily Stoic Practice and share your insights in the comments. Your thoughts may inspire others on their own journeys to inner peace and resilience. Don't miss our daily videos, insightful discussions, and practical tips for applying Stoic principles to your modern life.